Welcome to New York Nonprofit Media. I'm the editor-at-large, A. Mason Pierre, and I'm here in the CEO corner with Jess Dannhauser, CEO of Grand Windham. And just to tell you a little bit about the organization, founded in 1806, which makes it the longest-running nonprofit, non-sectarian child welfare agency in the nation.
That's right.
Is that correct?
That's right.
And founded by a group of women, which included Alexander Hamilton's wife, Elizabeth Schuyler Hamilton, and of course, just 2 days ago, the Broadway musical Hamilton, in which Miss Hamilton mentions founding the organization, won a Grammy for Best Musical Theater Album. Today, you're about a $60 million organization?
We are. Okay. We are. About $58 million in this year's budget.
Okay. And 11 sites throughout the city where you offer your child welfare?
We do. We like to think about it as family and youth development, which has a child welfare, an important child welfare component, preventive services, family foster care. And we do all of that work and our youth development work in Central Brooklyn, in Harlem, and in the Bronx. And then we have a school in Westchester, and most of our kids come from those same communities at our school.
Great. Can you just tell us, just in terms of the recent news, a little bit about the effect that the Broadway musical has had, both on your organization, say financially, and also directly on the people that you serve?
Well, the first thing is it's been an enormous sort of spirit builder for the organization. About a year ago, a little over a year ago, Lin-Manuel gave us a gift when he found out that we were the organization that Eliza had created with 3 other progressive women of their time, whose story really deserves to be told. It's an extraordinary story. And no one better to tell it than Lin-Manuel Miranda, that's for sure. So I called him to thank him for the gift. We had met over social media on Twitter. And one of my staff encouraged me to give him a call. I didn't know who he was at that time. I'm embarrassed to say that, but it's true. And so I called him, and he said, I'm happy to do it, and you're just going to be totally shocked when you see the end of this play. You got to come see it. And so we got tickets to see it at the Public and met him after the play and realized how big of a part of the story that he realized was for Eliza in creating the orphanage, and that was one of her proudest moments, particularly after the death of Alexander. And he was an orphan, and she saw connection between the kids she was helping to raise and him. And to have that be told in such a public way has been a spirit booster. They have been extraordinarily generous financially. They did a luncheon for us in October. They've been finding ways to funnel some of the money that comes in in donations to a variety of organizations through Broadway Cares. So Broadway Cares gave us a wonderfully generous gift. Probably most importantly, though, has been their presence. Luis Miranda, Lin-Manuel's father, has been an enormous presence for us. He was the one who encouraged us to do a fundraiser in the first place. And Philippa Sue, who plays Eliza Hamilton, her and her castmate Morgan have started something called the Eliza Project. So they work with our kids every week on Tuesday afternoons. They're going to have a finale presentation next week, and they're doing a master theater and arts class with our kids. She came up to our campus, to our school, and saw it and interacted with the kids. They had them backstage, and they're amazing with our kids. They understand, they don't see them as kids who have been, who are somehow to be pitied or feel sorry for. They see them as kids who are incredibly capable, and that's how we see our kids as well, and want all of everyone who's engaging to support our community to understand that, yes, our kids have had a really tough start, but that doesn't define them, and what does define them is how they do in the future. And Hamilton's story is very similar to that, so we have found a lot of inspiration in knowing that he had such a tough start. A mother who died, a father who left, a cousin who committed suicide, but there was a community around him that sent him here, a community that continued to support him when he was here, and we want to be the same for our kids.
Wonderful. You know, and also the fact that being a CEO of an organization that's not just so long running and does such wonderful work, but also was founded by a woman during a time when that was a rare thing. I mean, how does that impact, you know, how you present the legacy to the young people that you serve? I know even just to you as you carry that on.
Well, it's still true, notwithstanding the fact that I'm the CEO. Our board chair is a woman who really lives in Eliza's legacy. She's extremely generous. She is really, really intent that every one of our kids and every one of our families is delivered the type of care and service that they deserve. And most of our team are women, and the leadership of the organization reflects our founding. And I take that very seriously. I think there is a really important role that diversity plays in our work, and diversity of every kind. And there's something particularly special about women leadership, particularly when caring for kids, and so we continue to honor that to today.
Wonderful. Now, just to talk a little bit about what's happening with Title IV funding, which would allow more flexibility to be supportive of preventive services that would hold families together, as opposed to being sort of more on the after a child is removed, and allowing more funding to be used at that point. Tell me a little bit about what you think the thinking change has to be to encourage people to be more supportive of holding a family together, as opposed to pulling out the child. Because I mean, are you supporting the family, or does the first priority become get that child out of an unsafe situation? How do you make that thinking change?
Sure. Well, I think New York has done it for the most part. There's more we can do. There's opportunity to pursue for sure. But New York is one of the very few states that has as robust a child welfare system, preventive services system, as foster care system. In fact, we serve more children in preventive services today than we do in foster care. New York has embraced the idea of supporting families. We use parent advocates and parent peer supporters at a much greater rate than you'll see around the country. So New York primarily pays for that. Both the city and state have made a real commitment to preventive services. It's a major part of the reason we have fewer children in foster care than ever before. I also think parent representation is a part of the reason we have fewer children in foster care than ever before. The parents are getting good legal representation, which is something the city and state decided to invest in. And so when you look at the federal landscape, you see the city and state really working around the federal funding streams. And so much federal policy has moved towards supporting families, keeping kids and families safely, but the funding stream has stayed the same. And they've created waivers for cities and states to get around the rules that really target most of the money to be after a child is removed from their home, and is intended to pay for quality foster care, but not a lot of support to the parent. And so the funding hasn't kept up with the policy change. New York has been a leader in bringing funding to support those policy changes, and now it's time for the federal government to do the same. And so we're really encouraged that Senator Wyden and Senator Hatch are hopefully going to introduce this bill that would create for the first time the opportunity to spend that 4E funding on preventive services. There's a lot of evidence that that's what works, and I think when we think about our work in a historical context and understand that how damaging it can be to take families apart, we know that we have to do better as a country. And there's more we can do as a city. Today, most families, to get family support of the variety that we provide, need to sign up and say that their children are at risk of foster care. That's a very hard thing for a family to do. It's a hard system to trust for obvious reasons and for historical reasons. And so it's important, we think, that the legislation be structured in such a way that New York could use this opportunity, should this bill pass, to create primary prevention strategies where we're running family centers out of community centers, and families can come in for the type of neighborly support that they need that isn't directly connected to the child welfare system. So much of the risk, we believe at Graham, is created by families who are isolated socially, families who are worried about how they'll be judged. And there's so much we can do by offering non-judgmental support. Of course, there are times to have a child removed from their family, but we should know we do it, that it creates its own set of damage, and that when we do it, we should be doing it only when we really believe that children are unsafe. And I think New York's doing a much better job at that. And so it's an exciting time to see that there's potentially federal support for something that the field believes in strongly.
Wonderful. We've talked about a lot of the good news that's been happening, but what is one of the biggest challenges that your organization is facing right now?
So there are a number of challenges. I think most of them are about finding a way to pursue opportunity. And in a funding environment that is tight and tough, not only is the struggle just sort of keeping one's head above water, it's about the opportunity cost to do things that you would like to do. And so we've been very fortunate to have some really strong private support over the past few years so that we can do things like launch our Graham Slam program, which coaches our kids until they're 25 years old, and launch our Forever Families program, which provides parent-peer support after children are reunified or after children are adopted. The normative coaching and neighbor-to-neighbor type supports, I think too often have fallen to the wayside in favor of professionalized supports. The professionalized supports are important, but they're a piece of the solution. And so the real challenge is how do you do that well, do it quickly, the professional work, to make sure that the risks that are there, the things that need to be solved, get solved. Do it well, do it with the right resources, but don't lose all of your resources to that. When we know a big part of the solution is in community and family development and youth development. And so connecting different contracts with one another, making sure that our kids who are in preventive services and our families in Harlem, as an example, are also in our Cornerstone program in Harlem, so they're getting that nurturing care, that they're connected to the entire community of care that we can provide, and that we are thinking long-term about solving these challenges, helping families solve the challenges that they've struggled with for generations, some of them, so that we don't repeat a cycle where children who are in foster care with us have children who end up in foster care with us, as an example. And that takes a long-term commitment that is very hard to do and very contract specific, but that is what innovation's for. And so pursuing that opportunity and making sure that we see our kids and families as kids and families who are growing over time, and not just as a problem to be solved for a particular period of time, is something that is our biggest challenge, but it's also our biggest opportunity.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for your time. And in closing, this is Amy St. Pierre, and I'm in the CEO Corner with Jess Dannhauser, Graham Windham. Certainly.